Over the course of this video, not only am I going to prove to you that Leon Edwards is potentially the worst champion of the modern era and criminally overrated, but I'm also going to take a look at the pros and cons of high-functioning autism in an MMA setting. Leon Edwards had a pretty long road to get to the UFC Welterweight Championship, loses his UFC debut to Claudio Silva. Claudio Silva at the time was pretty good. He could have been something, but he was plagued by injuries. And by the time he had finally recovered, he was out of his prime, and the sport had moved on from specialists. He beat Seth Baczynski, who was on a 2-fight losing streak, and was 5-5 in the UFC. Seth beat names like Neil Magny and Matt Brown, but he could never really hang at a high level. He is now 22-18. He's been losing to bums on the regional scene for the past 8 years, but this is a good thing because Seth Baczynski is a certified asshat. Pavel Pavlak went 2-1 in the UFC, but this is a very underrated win. The guy has been off in KSW wrecking house for a while now. Pavel just needed to move to middleweight to really find his groove. And then Leon lost to some unknown guy from Nebraska. You may not have heard of him. Kamaru Usman. Yeah, no, understandable, pretty dominant win for Usman. But the second longest unbeaten streak at welterweight begins here. Leon beat Dominic Waters, who went 0-3 in the UFC, and then retired 2 years later at 10-6. Albert Tumanov is a mainstay at American Top Team. He went 5-3 in the UFC, and then he went back to the Russian MMA scene, maximizing his money by beating cans in ACA. Given where Vicente Luque was in his career, I'm tempted to say that this is the best win of Leon's. The Leon fight is sandwiched between a 4- and 6-fight win streak. Super impressive. Leon then beat Brian Barberena, had a little bit of trouble in that fight but pulled through. Barberena is a phenomenal top 25 gatekeeper, and he fought everybody. So he becomes a very good measuring stick for the rest of the division. Peter Sabata went 4-6 in the UFC, retired in 2020 after losing to Leon and Cowboy Oliveira. Speaking of cowboys, Donald Cerrone. Cerrone was 35 and Leon was 26. Cerrone was coming off a win over Yancy Medeiros, but before that he lost to Masvidal, Lawler, and Till. Split decision win for Leon Edwards against Gunnar Nelson. Now, Gunnar Nelson is a hard fighter to place because he beat the Barberenas, Cowboy Oliveiras, Alan Jobans of the world, but he loses to Ponzinibbio, Burns, and Edwards. Leon then beat RDA. The same people that give Colby Covington shit for beating an old, undersized RDA seem to forget that Usman and Leon also beat him within a 13-month period. And they say he's one of their best wins. Just saying, guys. Eye pokes Bilal Muhammad in a fight where Leon was winning. We've seen recently that Bilal is a pace and pressure guy, so maybe he would have had more success later in the fight. I guess we'll never know. Bilal wanted an immediate rematch. Leon said, "No, I want a title shot." And the UFC said, "Best we can do is Nate Diaz." Decisively beats Nate for 24 minutes. A leg kicker fights a guy who never learned leg kick defense. I wonder how this is gonna go. But then, everybody goes batshit, and we get one of the coldest MMA photos of all time. We almost got Diaz-Usman for the belt. Then we get to the second Usman fight. You already know the story. Elevation. Usman's up, relying more on his boxing. Gives Leon an opportunity to get the head kick by not wrestling as much, not being as physical, hanging out at kicking range. He finds it in the fifth. In the third Usman fight, 2 glove hooks, 2 nut shots, 2 fence grabs, 1 point deducted. That doesn't add up, folks. If we take a look at the scorecards for this fight, they were all over the place. I had it a draw. Leon won rounds 1, 3, and 5. Usman won 2 and 4. But the point deduction in the third means it's a 9-9 round. Anytime Leon would hit Usman with a glancing blow, the crowd would just go apeshit. Makes sense because it's in the UK, but Leon mostly circled and outpointed Usman, whereas Usman pressed forward, throwing lots of power shots. Then we get to the Colby Covington fight. I get it, excuses, but Colby did break his foot early in the first off a high kick. You can see it in this frame right here, landed very cleanly on the elbow, permanently hampered Colby. Colby's a pressure guy, he's a movement forward guy. Hard to do that on a bum foot. Colby still came on late and won the 5th round, but Leon pretty decisively won. And then we get to his fight at UFC 304 against Bilal Muhammad. Now, Bilal is very similar to Usman in quite a few ways. Usman kicks a bit more, but they're both physical, use heavy wrestling, not a ton of submission threat, simple yet effective boxing, acne at 30 years old, you know, that kind of thing. So a younger Usman with better knees and slightly better boxing matches up better against Leon Edwards. Leon cheated in this fight too, kept grabbing the fucking cage. We gotta start chopping off fingers, ladies and gentlemen. We gotta have 8 ninjas, one for each side, and they just sit. And you stick your fucking fingers through that fence, and they just chop that shit off, okay? Those were the fights that did happen, but there were a whole bunch that didn't. These are the times that Leon and or his opponents pulled out, and it changed the course of history. Now, I completely forgot this, and you guys might have too. Edwards versus Masvidal was booked for UFC 269. Nice. They promised Leon a title shot, and then they hornswoggled him into another fight. Jorge Masvidal gets injured, so they just give Leon the title shot. Tyron Woodley versus Leon Edwards was booked, but got canceled due to the pandemic. Even if Leon won that, it would have been degraded over time just because everybody else was beating Tyron around this time. And then there was the saga with him and Hamzat, and them both repeatedly getting COVID. In hindsight, Hamzat is a horrible matchup for Leon. Seeing what Chimaev did to Whitaker and Usman, and what Bilal did to Leon, things could have went down very differently. Leon Edwards has a very unique skill set, but he is not built for war like some other fighters. His best and most violent highlight is a 5-second pad work clip. Leon mostly moves laterally, using a pick-your-poison style. What I mean by that is, just like the Usman finish, it's all about setting up traps, similar to Adesanya in some ways. And this really became more obvious during the last 3 to 4 fights of his career after the Usman KO. If his opponent circles towards his power, Leon has options. Roundhouse to the legs, body, and later on to the head. If the opponent circles the other side, they eat a lead leg kick, maybe a lead hook, or a jab. Those all become better weapons. Leon is good from both stances, so even if his opponent switches, he can switch to and match the power side to the rear hand. If his opponent moves towards him, he can feint to deter the entry, or he can crash in, clinch, and try to land some elbows and knees. Which leads us to Leon's glaring weaknesses. Like the one place he can't go is forward. We figured this out in the Colby Covington fight. Leon needs to counter-strike. In the first round, Colby fought very passive, maybe even passive defensive. Leon would circle and feint into range, but then he'd kinda just stand there. He landed front kicks to the body, but they weren't really powerful. They're more for just something to do. And like other fighters from the UK, he has some trouble against strong wrestlers. He's a BJJ black belt under Thomas Bratcher, who's a real asshole. Roid rage, sucker punching, 2-12 in tournaments since 2019, so I don't even really know how much a black belt is worth under this guy. Leon's BJJ and wrestling are good, but a big part of MMA wrestling is not accepting positions, which Leon isn't very good at, which leads me to my next issue. He has the quitter's mentality. For how much people want to praise him and his coach for digging in after almost losing to Usman, no one talked about how truly dejected he was, and everyone somehow assumed that this was just a one-time thing. That was over now, and he had confidence in his power. But he didn't, because somewhere deep down, he also understands that it was a fluke. So he started every fight the same as the Usman fight, a little bit pissy, a little bit dejected, and then he slowly builds over time, sometimes. Sometimes he doesn't get there. This is a clear pattern with Leon Edwards, and again, for all the praise that him and his coach get, we should really be asking a tougher question: why does he start fights like this anyways? Leon has never lost by finish, but he fights like someone with a glass chin. Maybe he does. Maybe that's why he's holding back. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me. He also has a horrible poker face. Every time he gets clipped, his eyes glaze over, he stumbles backwards, slowly begins to compose himself and recover. But the eyes never lie, baby. I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, but I have been around enough autistic people of varying degrees or severities or whatever word you want to use, different places on the spectrum, To me, I look at Leon's fight style and overall demeanor, and it screams high-functioning autism. Not great improvisation on the mic, kind of awkward at press conferences and during media, can stick to a game plan as well as execute on a variety of techniques. Very devoted, and when he's motivated or fixated, he's extremely successful, but when things aren't going his way, he gets flustered and discouraged, and it begins to snowball. There are no quick fixes for Leon Edwards. It took me a lot of time to figure out how I'd even do it, but I know for sure that it's not a technical flaw. Leon is super crisp. He knows how to do everything. He can execute very well. The only thing he needs is anger, and not in a corny, icy red bro kind of way. Leon is kind of like Piotr Jan or even Marlon Vera in the way that they build as the fight goes on, download information, and they figure out distance, stuff like that. Leon can show urgency, like the head kick against Usman, moments in the third fight with Usman, and the last 30 seconds of the Bilal Muhammad fight. He pressed down on the gas pedal, and he took it to Bilal for the last 30 minutes. Bilal was shitting his pants. But it's always when he needs to clutch up. If he can figure out a way to harness that and use it early, when he's less tired and maybe has more power, still using a similar pick your poison game plan, but while on the front foot. Much easier said than done, but everyone in the top 5 at welterweight is so evenly matched to where Bilal might lose the belt, Leon gets a win, and he's right back in there for a title fight. I don't hate the guy, but he's a serial cheater, he's extremely prone to boring fights, and he is criminally overrated. My argument is indisputable, my proof is irrefutable, but I guess I could be persuaded. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more MMA content. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good time.